What's up, and welcome to Surging Ahead. This is Brett, and today we're going to talk about renewable energy. Or, more accurately, we're going to talk about a recent white paper that suggests Bitcoin could be the driver for deployment of renewable energy sources. Seems a little counterintuitive, but let's dive into the study and see what we think. Okay, so here's our study. This study is brought to you by Square, the Bitcoin Clean Energy Initiative, and ARK Invest. So I'm going to preface this whole conversation by stating that the companies involved in this all have vested interests in seeing Bitcoin be successful and continue to earn additional money for them. So I don't think it's quite as bad as a oil survey or a survey white paper from, I don't know, BP on why oil is not actually causing climate change. However, there is some clear bias in this paper, so go ahead and take it with a grain of salt as we look through it. The Bitcoin network functions as a unique energy buyer that could enable society to deploy substantially more solar and wind generation capacity. This deployment, along with energy storage, aims to facilitate the transition to a cleaner and more resilient electricity grid. We believe that the energy asset owners of today can become the essential Bitcoin miners of tomorrow. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about where they get this. First, they go ahead and talk about the unsubsidized costs of electricity. So they start off by saying the unsubsidized costs of solar and wind energy are now 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour and 2 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, respectively. Certain individual projects have had even lower costs. For context, the average LCOE for fossil fuels such as coal or natural gas is 5 to 7 cents a kilowatt hour. This means that solar and wind are already at a lower price point than coal and natural gas. Solar and wind energy also just reached cost parity with both geothermal and hydroelectric, with around 3 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, are inexpensive but geographically limited. So that just goes to say, hey, you know what? Solar and wind are already cheaper, so there's no reason we shouldn't go that route. I agree. However, they go on to talk about some of the limitations here. Sorry, I didn't highlight this. In essence, the sun shines during the day, but not at night. Wind is more unpredictable, but tends to blow more heavily at night. Energy supply is therefore either abundant or non-existent. Demand, however, peaks around the late afternoon or early evening when people arrive home and turn on appliances, at which time neither solar nor wind are abundantly available. The end result is significantly more power than society typically needs for a few hours per day, and not nearly enough when demand spikes. So they go on to talk about how this is problematic, but batteries are probably the answer to some of these. So increased transmission capacity and energy storage will be critical to solving these problems, especially as lithium-ion batteries continue to fall down their cost curve. For the moment, though, utility-scale batteries are still too expensive to deploy universally. After they've fallen another 80% in cost, they will still face physical limitations around their useful lifespan and for how long they can store energy without dissipation. They, however, will be the most critical technology in storing inexpensive midday solar power for evening peak demand. So I think this goes to say, hey, obviously solar and wind are not going to be able to cover all of our needs until we're able to do something with batteries, at which point they say even if they fall another 80% in cost, they're still going to be too expensive and have other issues. So I don't know about that. I do know batteries are probably too expensive to make the math all work out yet. So I am in kind of agreement with that. But if they're down another 80% in cost, I think it's really difficult to predict what kind of physical limitations the batteries will have as far as lifespan and energy storage at that period of time. But they're making some assumptions here, and who knows whether they're actually going to be right. So, what do they suggest doing? They say that combining miners with renewables plus storage projects, we believe it could improve the returns for project investors and developers, moving more solar and wind projects into profitable territory, allow for the construction of solar and wind projects even before lengthy grid interconnection studies are completed, as Bitcoin miners can offtake the energy until selling to the grid becomes possible, and then provide the grid with readily available excess energy for increasingly common black swan events like excessively hot or cold days when demand spikes, e.g., the early 2021 outages in Texas. And they go on to state that the second major potential impact could be a sizable transformation in the greening of the Bitcoin mining industry. It's estimated that there's only 10 to 20 gigawatts of mining capacity worldwide today. I might take umbrage with the word only there. Their words, not mine. Deploying miners at even 20% capacity with the above mentioned 200 gigawatts of delayed solar and wind projects on US grid alone could result in 40 gigawatts of new mining capacity, effectively dwarfing the entirety of the existing global market. Once again, I don't know that double the size is necessarily dwarfing it, but I get their point. It is a lot of potential resources being dedicated to mining this stuff. And then they go on to say, note that while many of these projects would likely be built behind the meter to utilize otherwise curtailed solar and wind power whenever possible, they would likely still mine with grid electricity during other periods when profitable to do so. It wouldn't be entirely green from day one, but if solar and wind became less expensive and constitute an increasingly large portion of baseload power, the ultimate trend would continue moving quickly toward renewable dominated hash rate. I think they go ahead and admit one of the bigger issues here, which I wanted to bring up as kind of a counterpoint to a lot of this, which is it's not free to deploy the mining hardware at these locations. There is a large investment of mining hardware to have to get out. So every single ASIC you deploy is going to cost you a significant amount of money. And I find it impractical to think that they would want to deploy these to only use them at peak times, because then you're never going to get your ROI out of them. So then are you going to just then use regular grid electricity when solar's down? Or are you just going to be less likely to sell your solar and wind energy out to the rest of the grid because it's more profitable to mine with it than it is to provide it to anyone else? I mean, especially if they're just using their own power, I guess that's greener, so it's better to have that. But they're saying this would dwarf what's out there for capacity, but they don't say that the current mining capacity would go away because of this new stuff. So it seems like that would be a continued draw on that particular source of power. Okay, so that's the study. I don't know. There's a lot there that sounds interesting. I do think it would be advantageous for solar providers and wind providers to have some way to make money immediately off of their deployment of solar and wind energy. I think my biggest concern on all of this would be, does this really solve the energy problem then, or are they just going to find that it's more economical for them to use all of that energy to fund their Bitcoin mining operations rather than to sell to public entities? And does this actually replace the current mining operations out there, or does this just prove to have an additional drain on energy resources while the current mining rigs continue to operate under low-cost coal and oil plants that are already burning these fossil fuels to provide the energy needed to mine Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever cryptocurrency is out there. Having said this, my views on cryptocurrency are very conflicted. I like a lot of the DeFi. I think it's very neat. I think it has potential to really redefine how we handle our currencies across the world, in addition to providing neat ways to provide uniqueness to digital items through non-fungible tokens and stuff like that. So I do think there is value in these cryptocurrencies. I just am very conflicted with how they utilize energy and are causing harm to the environment. So something like this sounds great. But once again, you go back to the source of these papers. All of these people have a vested interest in Bitcoin doing well. ARK Invest also has a vested interest in solar and wind energy companies doing well. So for them, win-win if both of them do great, right? But I don't have as much of a vested interest in either of these. What I do have a vested interest in is having a world continue to exist. So I am conflicted about cryptocurrencies and their impact to the environment. And I don't know. Tell me what you think. Does this study have any validity to it? Are you kind of like me going, well, sounds great, but it just doesn't feel right. And it feels like there are too many loopholes to ever stop this from really being an effective way to deploy more renewable energy. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. This has been Brett with Surging Ahead. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. But thanks for watching, and have a great day.